Hi everybody. Having mental health problems, there are many different things how an illness can affect you, but having the right treatment, right therapies can help you along the way. Learning to accept, that's a big thing, accepting and getting an understanding of your illness. But there are some things that you have to, like self-care as well, with to help with your symptoms. There are many, like the thoughts, trying to cope with those distracting thoughts that you may get. There are many different types of thoughts. Delusional thoughts, where your thinking gets distorted, and the delusions there of what's real, like reality and not reality, how the mind, how it affects your mind, how it affects your thinking, your way, how you perceive things, like the non-reality and reality, knowing what's real and what's not real. That takes a bit of time, because a lot of the time there's the distraction there of the thoughts, getting drawn into that way of thinking, those thoughts like a magnet. Sometimes it can probably suck you in there, into those thoughts, distracting you and causing distraction for your day-to-day living, the things that you may be doing, maybe wanting to shy away from the outside world because of it, feeling lonely and in despair. There are many things that create around a mental illness, but in this video I'm going to be talking about the thoughts, your feelings and emotions. Your thoughts, like I said, they just get distorted because the mind is suffering, it's confused, it just doesn't know what to do. So it affects your thinking. Now we all think, we all think, everybody thinks, everybody's thinking throughout the day, getting thoughts. But sometimes those thoughts, the mind gets confused, is in pain and it's suffering. So it affects the way that you may be thinking, in a way that it's, like I said, it's in pain, it's in suffering, and the thoughts become a bit more overpowering, a bit more overpowering, a bit more noticeable, because like I said, everybody gets thoughts throughout the day. Every minute, every second of the day, we're all thinking. It's just that we just don't take no notice of them. But when you're suffering with mental health problems, that becomes a bit more of a problem there, because like I said, the mind is suffering, it just doesn't know what to do, and it distorts the thinking. And the thinking sometimes, like I said, it gets a bit more overpowering, and sometimes those thoughts, the thinking, is like a bully, say like a bully there, being in control of you and in control of your thinking. Then it goes to your feelings and emotion, how it affects you emotionally, your feelings and emotions, how it affects you, making you feel negative within yourself. But it's learning to put away from that. It's like putting away from that negative, the added, because sometimes with all that thinking going on, those thoughts, even the repetitive thoughts, that thought that keeps popping up, keeps coming and going, replaying itself, can become very distracting within itself. So it's all about learning to let those thoughts come up, arise and pass, without the added on top. And when I say the added on top, it's the added the automatic reaction towards those thoughts, like the fear, the anger, the resentment around it, and so forth. The added on top, sometimes that in itself just causes a bigger problem, creates a bigger problem, but it's a natural reaction to those thoughts as well at the same time. You know, it could be tough. Trying to deal with the thoughts in itself, those thoughts that you may experience with your illness can be quite tough, I can imagine, become quite draining, make you feel lacking energy. So that's how it makes you feel within itself, all the added on top of it. So it's learning to be mindful, learning mindfulness around it. Mindfulness, like I said, letting the thoughts arise and pass, putting away from that negative that is created around the illness, that creates those negative thoughts that you may experience within, like I said, feeling within yourself, feeling negative within yourself. So coping with that to be able to coping with that, to make those thoughts that you experience a little bit more easier to cope with throughout the day. Because, you know, sometimes they may come to the forefront and be a bit more noticeable, and other times they may be just at the back of the mind there, and sometimes out of the blue they can arise. But it's like not blocking out those thoughts. It's all about letting those thoughts arise and pass, not clinging on, not holding on to it, not clinging on to it. It's like learning to let go of that negative thought that has arisen, just letting it pass without the added laid on top. So the techniques there, you think of what makes it worse. It's like, imagine a cat. A cat comes into the garden and you see the cat there and you feed it, and that cat remembers, and then it comes back the next day and you do the same, and that cat will keep coming back because you fed it. You fed that cat. So the more you feed that cat, the more that cat is coming back. Now this is just an example. So you keep feeding that cat keeps coming back, until one day you decide not to feed that cat because you realise that cat has just come into your garden because you've just been feeding it. So you decide not to feed it. That cat may come back into your garden, but even though you haven't fed that cat, and then it might keep coming back. The more you don't feed it the next day, but that cat may keep coming back. So it'll keep coming back, and then eventually that cat will realise it's not being fed, and then it will go, and that cat won't come back into your garden again. So that's just an example of thinking of your thoughts, those uncomfortable, those thoughts you experience with your illness, feeding it. So feeding the cat is like feeding those thoughts, like the added on top, that's laid on top, your natural reaction to those thoughts. You take that away and those thoughts will arise, and learning to be, so replacing the added on top with more mindfulness, more compassion there, learning compassion. Now that's an hard one, but it's all about learning new techniques to improve, to help with your thoughts, to help you get on with your day-to-day, those thoughts that distract you throughout the day, that drag you in, that pull you in, and like you may lose concentration because of those thoughts. And what you're doing is learning to cope with the thoughts that you experience with your illness. So the added on top is like the feeding the cat. So you learn, you think, I'm not going to feed those thoughts with the added on top. So it's like learning to do that, learning to pull away from that, learning to let those thoughts arise and pass. So it's not creating a cycle there, because the mind in itself, it's like a memory, and it always goes back to where it's familiar with. So it creates a pattern there and goes to that familiar place. So it's learning and creating a new habit of trying to cope with your thoughts, to enable you to cope with your thoughts a little bit easier, so they don't become so much of a bother, so they don't bother you so much. So it's creating a new it's creating a new habit there. So but these things do take time. They take time and they take practice. The more you do it, the better you get at it. So the more you do it, you will start to learn to be able to cope with those thoughts that you may experience. You know, the different ones, the paranoia thoughts, the delusional thoughts, the believable thoughts, those thoughts that just drag you straight in like a magnet. You will eventually create a new habit of learning to accept those thoughts and let them arise and pass. Because like I said, everybody experiences thoughts, but it's learning to let go of that thought that arises, that thought, that uncomfortable thought that you may experience, learning to pull away from that negative that is created around it, learning to not add on like the natural reaction towards that thought. It's like I said, feeding the cat. You start to not go towards that thought with that added, learning to let go of it. So it's learning to cope with your thoughts and the thoughts as well, and how it makes you feel within yourself, like your feelings and emotions, accepting what is going on. Accepting your illness is a big thing as well. That getting that understanding there of how your illness, how it affects you within as a person, because everybody is different with their symptoms and how it affects them. But it's learning to create new habits to be able to cope with those thoughts, and accepting and learning to cope with your feelings and emotions, because it goes to your feelings and emotions. It's like learning to pull away from that inner. You get drawn into your feelings and emotions, the inner, and your thoughts get drawn into your thoughts. Is all about focusing away from that, not blocking, but focusing away from the inner, letting those thoughts and feelings and letting them arise and pass. Like having something as well that helps, which is Andy techniques, things to focus on, things that you can do that will, positive things like your self-care coping strategies, which are very good, which will help to with your thoughts and your feelings and emotions. Talking, that's a big thing with some people, like talking about their thoughts and their feelings and their emotions, like when they're experiencing mental health problems. But once you start to once you start to talk about it, talk about those thoughts, talk about what is going on with your mind, talk about your feelings and emotions, that's another way of coping with those thoughts as well. There are many techniques, but it's all about what works for you. And the more you do it, the more you do these things, the better you get at it. And it also as well, it will, like with you dealing with those thoughts as well, once you start to the more, like I said, the more you do it, the more you like learn these techniques like that, not having that clinging on to those thoughts, learning to pull away from those thoughts, you start to feel a bit, your concentration is like building on your concentration, your confidence, because with all that going on, it can just affect, with all that going on, it can just affect your confidence and your concentration, especially with the thoughts. It can affect your concentration because, like I said, you get drawn into those thoughts that are going on, those thoughts there, and it pulls you, and it can affect your concentration. Like I said, you could be sat watching the telly, you might not even be concentrating on what is going on, whatever you're watching. You could be focusing more on your thoughts and feelings. So it's learning to put away from that and build on your concentration. There are many benefits there, you know, with coping with those thoughts, because that's a big thing as well. The thought, the inner world, with suffering with mental health problems, whatever it is, you get drawn to that inner world. The inner world is like learning to pull away from that and focus on the outer, focusing on the outer rather than the inner. Focus away for those thoughts in a way that you're not blocking them, so they don't create a cycle, because that's what happens. The mind always goes back to where it's familiar with. So once you create a new habit of how you cope with them, that mind will go to that. And like I said, the more you do it, the better, more benefit you will get out of it. And you will start to realise that, and that will give you that incentive to carry on with whatever you're doing to help with those thoughts, feelings and your emotions. It goes into your confidence, it goes to your feelings and emotions. It'll help you cope better with whatever illness you are suffering with. You know, having a mental health problem, there is hope there. It doesn't have to be negative, feeling negative all the time, like the negative that's created around an illness. It can be turned into positive. You can turn it into positive. It's all about what you do to help with it, and that's the importance there. So this video was about coping with your thoughts that help with your feelings and emotions, learning to let go from those thoughts rather than clinging on to them, because that's what happens. The clinging on is the added that creates more of a problem, the natural reaction there. So yeah, this video is about learning to cope, ways of coping, learning to cope with your thoughts that you may experience. So I'm going to end the video there. Please share this video, because it's very important, our mental health, and there are many different things that affect people with their mental health, whether, like I said, whether it's always the inner, whether it's their thoughts, feelings and emotions. So it's very important knowing how to cope with that, and to be able, you know, to live you can live a near normal life with mental health problems. There is positives there, and you will get to that better place that you want to get to. Like I said, it's all about what you do to help with it. So I'm going to end the video there. Please share this video. If you wish to leave a comment below, feel free to. If you wish to subscribe, feel free to. It's free. It's free to subscribe. My channel is all about mental health in itself, like mental health. That's my channel. So I'm going to end the video there. See you in the next one.